This is the story of a man on the run, who fights the war on drugs, then falls victim to its seductive power. And it is the story of investigators from across the globe, betrayed by one of their own, who are determined to bring this desperate criminal to justice. Jurisdiction, the world. When crimes are committed, an international organization unites police officers to deliver justice. Interpol investigates. In the early 1980s, drug enforcement officers in Los Angeles wage a desperate battle on the front lines of the war on drugs. Jim Whitten works narcotics for the LA County Sheriff's Department.
The market was getting flooded when law enforcement pressure increased in Florida. The importing shifted to the West Coast.
In reaction to the crackdown in the East, the drug cartels redirect their deadly traffic through Mexico into California. LA is awash in cocaine.
The Sheriff's Department makes approximately 100,000 arrests per year. Narcotics arrests result in about 18 to 20,000 of those arrests. We were seizing more cash in the 80s than we'd ever seen before. Large amounts of cash in conjunction with large amounts of narcotics.
Local police are overwhelmed, and the DEA steps up their support.
There's a connection.
One of the men on the front lines is DEA agent Darnell Garcia.
All right, that's all I got.
He's an experienced cop who begins his career with the LAPD, then transfers to the DEA in 1978. Garcia's friend and fellow drug investigator Victor Guerrero still works undercover for the FBI, and his identity must be hidden for his own safety.
He had a very infectious personality, beamed with confidence. And since he had such an infectious personality and such a likable nature, that he instilled confidence in others, Darnell was always able to paint a very rosy picture. The glass is always half full, never half empty.
Garcia is close with two fellow agents, Ed Williams and Brian Hartford. The three men put their lives on the line every day, fighting what seems like a losing battle to keep drugs off the street. It is dangerous work, but it's work that Garcia does well.
He was a very street-savvy agent and seemed to know exactly what he was doing.
Former Assistant U.S. Attorney Terry Bowers worked with Garcia.
And as an undercover agent, he was able to work the streets well and come up with results. I think he also fostered a bit of a tough guy persona.
Originally from New York City, Garcia moves with his family to LA, where he attends high school. He joins the Army and serves 3 years during the Vietnam era. After he gets out of the Army, he returns to LA to attend college. He becomes obsessed with martial arts. Training with movie star and martial arts champion Chuck Norris, he goes on to become a champion himself.
Darnell trained very hard, and he was a successful competitor when he was in the martial arts circuit, and eventually winning the internationals in Long Beach.
Garcia eventually follows his teacher's footsteps, landing several movie roles, including one in the acclaimed Bruce Lee epic, Enter the Dragon. His competitive nature makes him a good cop. But for Darnell Garcia, being a good cop isn't enough.
You know, in a city like LA, where you have such extreme wealth and extreme poverty, the differential there is always something you have to live with. So with a law enforcement officer who's out there and exposed to large sums of cash on a regular basis, it's a big temptation. And I think they really have to fight the urge, particularly if they have a family.
Darnell wants to live the good life, a life his DEA salary can't support.
It was a shortcut to life. He wanted an expensive lifestyle. He found a venue to live this lifestyle he wanted to live, and he compromised his ethics as a result of that.
Garcia starts taking cash. He justifies this extra income as repayment for a dangerous and frustrating job.
You know, I'm out here for the community, putting my life on the line every day, and I'm not getting paid well, and I'm getting hassled, and you know, if I skim a couple bucks off the top of a bag of narco cash, who's gonna know and what's the problem?
Just be sure to check outside the door. I don't want to see anyone see him come in.
Garcia enlists the help of his friends, Ed Williams and Brian Hartford.
Let's go.
The three agents soon discover that stealing drugs is as easy as lifting cash.
Darnell Garcia was your worst nightmare. When people are out in the field doing the undercover work, if they're there too long and they don't have a real strong moral compass, the lines can start to blur a little bit.
Because of the millions to be made dealing drugs in the 80s, police corruption is rampant. And Garcia and his gang are in the middle of it, operating inside the DEA. The agency has no idea.
He did not have a great deal of respect for the agency that paid his salary. He found where there were some administrative weaknesses, where in fact he could be successful at what he planned to do. And since the opening was there, he took it.
With each heist, Garcia becomes bolder. In January of 1983, Garcia and his men steal approximately 1 pound of cocaine from a DEA seizure. To hide their crime, they rely on expertise gleaned from years of busting drug dealers.
As an undercover operative, you see what they do on the street. If you're going to go over to that side, you can adopt the same techniques and things that they do.
Dealers on the street often cut their cocaine with baking soda to increase the volume of their product. Garcia adopts this tactic himself. After he empties the cocaine from the evidence bag, he replaces it with baking soda. He's careful to leave just enough cocaine so that when the DEA tests the bag, they will find traces of coke and never realize Garcia took the drugs.
He was just using some of the techniques he observed while out as an undercover agent.
The plan works. DEA officials never notice that a switch has been made. In the first 2 years, Garcia's operation makes 10 thefts of narcotics, worth nearly $300,000. Garcia uses his inside knowledge of working investigations to keep his supply of drugs flowing. He stakes out suspected drug dealers and finds out where they hide their drugs. He then moves in to take the drugs before the DEA can make a bust. It is a brilliantly simple plan.
He was motivated to take the money from a drug seizure because he thought he can get away with it. So I'm sure he was very confident that the drug trafficker was not going to bring it up, and neither was he. Hence, no one to report it, no one to hear it.
Garcia plays both sides. He hides behind his badge to protect him from any retaliation from the dealers. Former head of Interpol in the United States, John Imhoff, ran a narcotics squad for the FBI in the 1980s.
They're always ready. They're always ready to protect their assets, and they're ready with heavy weaponry for the most part. Generally speaking, drug dealers are smart enough not to shoot cops.
Garcia seems untouchable. As months pass, Hartford, Williams, and Garcia start their own narcotics enterprise.
He had success taking money. Now he has success taking cocaine. He had a ready-made market. He just needed the right marketer.
Garcia knows exactly where to find them. He turns to the informants from his investigations. He now asks them to sell his drugs on the street.
Yeah, one of the great paradoxes of working drug enforcement investigations is that you're constantly associating with the criminal element. Now, your objective as a legitimate enforcement officer is to not get sullied by that. It's really surprisingly easy for a narcotics enforcement officer to find the route to sell drugs because they've been dealing with drug dealers all their careers.
Garcia and his gang create a distribution network rivaling any gang in the city. Business is good. In fact, too good. Garcia and his partners amass millions in profits.
There's so much money involved that money becomes not the be-all and end-all that you started out for, but a problem. You don't have any place that you can legitimately stash it. The government has seen to it that if you are putting too many dollars into a bank account, you're going to draw undue attention to yourself. So you have to deal with cash as cash, and it becomes cumbersome.
Garcia has to find a place to hide all his money. Always the ladies' man, he enlists his girlfriend, legal secretary Wendy Bedford, to help launder the profits.
Oh, I thought you'd never make it.
She buys cashier's checks for $9,900, a carefully chosen amount. The law requires banks to report anything over $10,000 to the government. Once Garcia collects enough checks, he looks for a place where he can hide large sums of cash from the prying eyes of the police. He finds it in Switzerland. In 1983, the three men travel to Zurich. Here, the banking industry is as powerful as it is discreet. And discretion is what clients like Darnell Garcia count on. Garcia, Hartford, and Williams each open secret individual bank accounts. In his first deposit, Garcia turns over 12 cashier checks, totaling $100,000. An impressive score. But Garcia is just getting started. At the DEA offices in Los Angeles, Darnell Garcia uses his badge to mask a drug trafficking operation.
Think I'd go back and get that gym bag? Yeah.
In 1984, Garcia lifts large amounts of drugs from the DEA, 1 kilo at a time. He thinks the DEA will never notice any of it is missing. He holds the agency in great disdain, according to his friend and fellow undercover agent, Victor Guerrero.
He was always very critical of the agency. Their shortcomings, a lack of resources, and generally their inexperience and ineffectiveness.
John, I'll bring it back.
In 1985, the agency transfers Garcia from LA to Detroit, but he refuses to go.
Yeah, you know procedure.
The DEA fires him.
Gotta keep all the records straight.
I cannot characterize Darnell as a good agent. He was a malcontent from the onset of his commencement of his career with DEA.
Garcia fights back and brings a discrimination suit against the agency. It is a brazen accusation from a man who has been stealing from the agency for years. But Garcia wins the suit, and the DEA is forced to reinstate him. His success only emboldens him. In October of 1984, 1 kilogram of heroin is reported missing from the DEA evidence vault.
That's my signature.
At first, the agency confronts the evidence custodian, but he denies all knowledge of the crime. According to sign-in sheets, many agents had access to the vault, including Darnell Garcia. The DEA opens an internal investigation and administers polygraph tests to some of the suspects. Several agents refuse to take polygraph tests. Garcia is one of them.
He's able to walk away from the offer of a polygraph that he clearly would have failed. You can't be forced to take that polygraph. So he gets to walk away, and he gets to thumb his nose at the internal affairs folks.
In 1985, with inconclusive results from the polygraph, the DEA begins investigating everyone who had access to the evidence locker. The list includes Brian Hartford and Darnell Garcia. But Garcia is not deterred.
Greed had taken a stronger hold of him. He thought that DEA would not even discover his activities. And as a result of being overconfident, he became bolder and bolder as the weeks and months went by.
Garcia remains with the agency, and in November of 1985, after staking out a series of drug safe houses, the men are ready to make their move. The agents have been targeting one of LA's biggest dealers. The three men believe this bust will make their careers. Inside, Garcia makes the record books, finding 400 pounds of cocaine with an estimated street value of $18 million. One of the largest stashes ever uncovered in Los Angeles.
You really don't know what you're going to find most times, and sometimes it's an amazing moment because the amount of money and the amount of product that you could come across in some of these places is just astounding.
But there are no press conferences, no photos with the mayor. In fact, Garcia never records the bust. The DEA has no idea it happened. Garcia takes all the coke to fuel his own distribution network. To hide their millions in profits, the men look overseas. Their illegal money goes straight into secret numbered bank accounts in Europe. Garcia and his gang make their deposits in cash. Just as the three men begin to think they are unstoppable, police get a break. In 1986, deputies from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department apprehend a pair of known drug dealers. The bust seems routine until the drug dealers start talking. Under interrogation, they reveal their drug source. One of their suppliers is a man who works in law enforcement. His name is Brian Hartford. The investigators run the name through their database and learn Hartford is a DEA agent working in LA. The agents also run down information on all Hartford's associates and learn he is close with Darnell Garcia and Ed Williams. The DEA steps up surveillance on the three men. The agency has to be extremely careful who they include in the investigative team.
Investigating your own is a problem on a number of levels. There are probably folks that you don't want to bring into that investigation because they are his friends. He knows all of the tools that can be brought to bear against him and can take guard against those things.
The agents learn Hartford is a frequent guest at Garcia's apartment in LA, near DEA headquarters. They question an employee at the apartment complex, and she tells them Garcia always pays his rent in cash. But the more agents look into Garcia and his friends, the more complex the man becomes. It seems his apartment is not his primary residence.
One of the big red flags is unexplained affluence, so you look for a new big house or a new car or a boat, things of that nature that don't necessarily match up with the salary of the agent.
They learned that in 1987, Garcia built a new home for his family in Rancho Palos Verdes, an exclusive suburb in Southern California.
In the early 80s, DEA agents probably earned somewhere around $40,000 to $50,000 per year. They went and saw the home, probably worth about $500,000 at the time. I cautioned Darnell and says that You better be careful about having some of your coworkers come visit you. They're going to wonder how you paid for this.
Garcia assures his friend he inherited the money for the down payment after the death of a relative. He says he borrowed the rest. Officials look at the people close to Garcia, hoping to find anything or anyone that seems incriminating.
When somebody's engaged in a crime where they're generating large sums of cash and they have to launder it, it generally is easier if you have a cohort, whether it's a spouse or a girlfriend.
Garcia, they discover, has both. The handsome DEA agent is adept at leading a double life, at work and at home. Though it is unclear what, if anything, the women know of his illicit activities. If Garcia is in collusion with anyone, he hides it well. The detectives on his trail do not see him meet with any known drug dealers. All they have are suspicions. So far, Garcia isn't giving them any hard evidence they can use to link him to any criminal activity.
Zebra William Young, 290.
But his phone records show a pattern. Garcia is making frequent calls to a number in New York. The DEA contacts the NYPD and asks for help. The number belongs to a former DEA informant, Howard Calhoun, now a known drug dealer. The DEA questions Calhoun, but he denies all knowledge of Garcia, Hartford, or Williams.
Could I have a seat? Thank you.
Skeptical of his story, the detective search his apartment. Some letters and a number scribbled in his address book blow the case wide open. They are Garcia's initials and phone number. Faced with this evidence, Calhoun and his girlfriend confess. The DEA learns a large number of overnight packages had been arriving at Calhoun's apartment. They trace the origin of the packages to an address in Los Angeles. The packages were coming from Garcia and his accomplice, Brian Hartford. Howard Calhoun tells the DEA that Garcia and his men shipped their drugs to him in overnight packages. He said he would then sell the drugs and ship the profits back to California overnight. The system was low-tech, but effective. The receipts from the overnight delivery service are the proof authorities need to arrest the rogue agents. So Garcia and his men can't tip each other off. The DEA plans to take all three men into custody at the same time. After 3 long years of investigating Garcia and his gang, on November 22nd, 1988, police make their move. Brian Hartford is arrested outside his home without incident. Edward Williams is also arrested. Like his partner, he does not resist. Completing their roundup, authorities surround the home of Darnell Garcia.
Darnell home.
No, he's not.
Look at the house.
No,
Sorry
you can't
about
come in there.
that. We have to.
Arresting officers find nothing to lead them to their suspect. Only photos celebrating his fast life. Darnell Garcia, the DEA agent turned drug dealer, seems to have vanished. In November 1988, federal agent and suspected drug dealer Darnell Garcia vanishes, just hours before he was to be arrested. But how did he do it? The only way he could have known they were coming to arrest him was if someone on the inside tipped him off. Agents talk to Garcia's friends and discover yet another girlfriend employed at the LA County Courthouse.
Do you have any other questions? There's my
She admits seeing his arrest warrants and warning Garcia. But she has no idea where he is.
Well, the initial frustration is that they're gone. It's just very frustrating to have a case worked up as a prosecutor and then you can't find the defendant.
Months pass, and federal grand juries in Los Angeles issue 3 superseding indictments. The County of Los Angeles charges Garcia with 26 counts, including conspiracy, possession, and distribution of narcotics, multiple currency reporting, and tax violations. The DEA keeps up surveillance on the missing agent, but Garcia does not return home.
Darnell Garcia is a sophisticated target, but ultimately operating under an alias is a very difficult thing to do, and even if you're a law enforcement officer, there are a lot of loose ends that can be pulled in order to let law enforcement track you down.
The DEA digs deep into Garcia's personnel file and list of known contacts. They keep up the pressure and talk with anyone who might know where he has fled. No one has seen or heard from him. Then, 2 months after Garcia's disappearance, police get a call that someone has spotted him at a North Hollywood club. Hungry for a break in the case, federal and local law enforcement take to the streets and the skies. They are determined not to let him slip away again. It seems unlikely Garcia is still in LA, but with the crafty and arrogant agent, anything is possible.
I felt the DEA was inept, couldn't find him. He was smarter than DEA and law enforcement.
For the second time in 2 months, officials come up empty. Police are no closer to catching their man or grasping his motives. And by June of 1989, Garcia is still on the lam. The DEA keeps his wife Anita and his 12-year-old child under surveillance. But they also vanish without a trace. With his family now gone, the DEA suspects Garcia has broken all ties with the U.S., and he's going to try and disappear forever.
In today's world, you can get anywhere on the globe very quickly and often very easily if you're willing to lay out the necessary cash. You definitely want to try and track the individual down as quickly as possible.
To stop his flight, investigators need to find where Garcia is hiding his cash and confiscate it. The DEA looks into his finances. According to Garcia's financial papers, he took a loan from an Italian businessman to pay for his fancy new home.
I don't know this.
They soon discover the loan was a fake. The papers forged by Garcia to cover the fact that he bought the house with drug money.
So let me understand clearly, you don't recognize this document nor the signature.
Further investigation reveals the true source of funding: a wire transfer of $420,000 from a bank in Switzerland made in May of 1987. During the course of the investigation, the DEA asks Switzerland to provide access to Garcia's accounts. But by the time authorities identify the bank, it is too late. Garcia closed the account. But the DEA continues to follow the trail, poring over Garcia's financial records. The agents uncover the existence of a second account in Luxembourg. They think they may have found Garcia and turn to Interpol for help.
The Interpol network is virtually exhausted, and when they broadcast a message, it goes out to every one of those countries. And most of those countries have the means to effectively disseminate that information so that people staying in hotels there, people crossing the borders there, people conducting financial transactions there are compared against that database.
The tiny nation of Luxembourg is tucked between France and Germany, but its small size masks an economic giant. Here, Interpol agents and local police bear a heavy caseload. The country's strategic position and its role as a banking center make it a frequent stopping point for criminals from all parts of the world. The DEA contacts Pierre Conan, who works for Interpol in Luxembourg, and tells him to be on the lookout for Darnell Garcia.
DEA considered him a very dangerous person, tracking down a skilled and trained police officer who knows how to avoid to be caught is much more difficult than a normal criminal.
Conan goes to the bank that issued the check. Yet once again, they are too late. Garcia has recently closed the account. For the bank manager, the transaction is memorable.
So first of all, he picked up the money in cash. He put it into a plastic bag, over $3 million. And he asked the bank manager, would you mind to come out with me and I will show you my vehicle? And that's what the bank manager did. He was guessing it would be a nice sports car.
It's so hospitable here to me.
But there is no Ferrari, just a bike. The manager recognizes a rental sticker from a hotel. Conan might be able to use this small clue to bring down this DEA agent turned drug dealer. Fugitive Darnell Garcia surfaces in Luxembourg in June 1989. Then promptly disappears, carrying $3 million in a plastic bag. Interpol believes that if Garcia is in Luxembourg, it may be their best chance to find him. Interpol's John Imhoff.
Darnell Garcia might be a sophisticated law enforcement officer, but he's a stranger in a strange land no matter where he goes. He's an American and he's going to stand out there more than he would in Southern California. Interpol can exploit that.
Garcia was last seen riding a bike, which Interpol agents tracked down to a nearby hotel. Staff members remember Garcia easily. He's a frequent guest. Conan traces phone records from Garcia's room to a travel agency in Luxembourg.
As a result of this information, we of course went to the travel agency.
A young woman, a travel agent, remembers Garcia. He had given her a lot of business.
They were able to identify him as one of their clients who a couple of times had flown from Luxembourg to Paris. We weren't able to trace him any further, but we just had the hope that he would show up again.
Conan again turns his attention to the money.
We started thinking that the money would still be in Luxembourg. If you withdraw over $3 million cash in a plastic bag, riding away on your bicycle, we were thinking that he went to put the money into another account with another bank.
But a survey of area banks comes up empty.
This is,
Darnell Garcia has not opened a new account. But where is he taking his money? Back in Los Angeles, officials have a theory.
Well, one thing, when you're tracking a fugitive, generally it helps to look for some sort of affinity or hobby or sport that the individual likes, because that may give you opportunities to track him down. Darnell Garcia had a particular affinity for Grand Prix racing.
But finding one man among the crowds attending the French Grand Prix will be nearly impossible. Held in July near Marseille, the race attracts thousands of fans. It's the perfect place to blend in and disappear. The DEA and Interpol are undeterred. They scour hotel records and reservations across the country, all searching for Darnell Garcia. In Paris, on July 3rd, 1989, with less than a week before the big race, French police assisting the DEA and Interpol get lucky. While inspecting guest registers, they discover Garcia's wife and son checked in at a hotel in Paris. Perhaps Garcia is in the country for the race. They dispatch agents to watch his wife in case Garcia shows. But while French police keep watch for the elusive criminal, less than 200 miles away in Luxembourg, Garcia makes an uncharacteristic misstep. He goes to the travel agency to cash in a plane ticket.
He had at one point made a reservation and paid for a round trip to Paris, but he never had used it. So basically the travel agency owed him some $200.
He wants his refund. It is incredible the man hiding millions would put himself at risk for such a small amount of money. The woman cannot let Garcia slip away. She waits for her opportunity, then steps away and calls police. She tells Conan that Garcia is about to leave the agency and begs the police to hurry. Conan urges her to stall, delay, do anything she can to keep their suspect in place.
It was very urgent that we would get to the scene as quickly as possible. My partner and myself, we just took our guns, jumped into the car.
For more than 7 months, Darnell Garcia eludes the law. Pierre Conan finally has the chance to take this dangerous criminal into custody, but without a backup. If anything goes wrong, an innocent woman is in danger of becoming a hostage, or worse. Police have never been closer to catching international fugitive Darnell Garcia. But with only 2 men to take down the ex-narcotics agent, Pierre Conan is worried.
This was in a way, a very delicate situation, and we didn't know if he was armed or whether he was not armed. So we approached him, and simultaneously we draw our guns. The first thing you realized were 2 .357 Magnum at his head. He was arrested because being so greedy, going back to this travel agency for $200.
After 7 years of illicit drug deals and 7 months on the run, the bars finally slam shut on Darnell Garcia. But now there is a new concern for the police, getting Garcia extradited back to the U.S. The DEA contacts Mary Jo Grottenrath at the Department of Justice. Experienced working with Interpol, she specializes in getting criminals back from Europe.
And then I took a good look at the Luxembourg Treaty because we hadn't used that one for quite a while. It was a very old treaty, as I recall. So old that it did not even have a provisional arrest request in it.
That means the government of Luxembourg cannot detain Garcia for extradition.
I didn't want to take that for an answer right away, so I talked to the Luxembourg authorities and said, what can we do? We have a really old treaty and we have a really bad guy located there, very serious fugitive.
Luxembourg officials find a local law allowing them to hold Garcia for 30 days if Grottenrath requests it and provides them with sufficient evidence of Garcia's crimes.
But 30 days is better than no days, and so we sent them the request.
Now, to gain Garcia's extradition back to the U.S., officials must present their case to a Luxembourg court. All 26 charges of drug trafficking, money laundering, and tax evasion. But the investigators still have a problem. They haven't found the money he was allegedly laundering.
At the end of the 30 days, he would have been released. They would have had no choice no matter what he did. Their law did not permit them to hold him longer. So the clock started ticking.
Interpol and the DEA have to come to terms with the fact that Garcia might slip away.
The hardest part of the job is finding the person and not getting him back or her. And this happens. Sometimes it's a temporary defeat, and sometimes you just don't get the person back, and you live with that.
While U.S. officials work to secure extradition, Conan keeps his eye on Garcia in jail. He hopes he will make some sort of slip-up that will lead him to the money.
Books, maybe 3, 4.
Garcia's wife is a frequent visitor. But she is not the only one.
Soon after his arrest, a couple of days later, he got visited by his wife, and a day later, or perhaps it was the other way around, by his girlfriend. One was visiting Garcia in the morning, the other was visiting him in the afternoon. It was obvious that both were very much in love with Darnell Garcia.
Or at the very least, they are fond of his $3 million. Conan tries to use this against him. Conan sets up surveillance on Garcia's girlfriend and his wife, hoping one of the women will lead them to the $3 million. But the surveillance goes nowhere. Neither one enters a bank or does anything suspicious. Pierre Conan suspects Garcia's wife knows she is being followed.
She was probably trained by Garcia to notice the specific indications of a surveillance. And so we were able to follow her for half an hour, and then we had to give up.
Determined to locate the money, Conan and his team focus on the paper trail Garcia left behind.
We were analyzing all the documents he had with him. He had 2 suitcases full of stuff.
Going through the suitcases, Conan comes across a new lead. Hidden in some of Garcia's notes is a number. Police trace the number to a bank in Luxembourg. The bank has no active account with Darnell Garcia's name attached. They search the records and find an account opened with nearly $3 million under one of Garcia's aliases. But once again, the account is empty. However, the bank manager remembers Mrs. Garcia.
His wife had shown up a couple of days after his arrest with a power of attorney, and she had withdrawn all the money from the bank.
It seems the $3 million has vanished. Police spread the word to banks in Luxembourg, asking them to look out for any accounts opened or closed around the period of Garcia's arrest. Several banks have accounts that fit the description. Garcia's wife made the deposits. He had given her the money for safekeeping. She, along with his girlfriend, opened several accounts under different names. Conan and Interpol finally locate the $3 million. The DEA now has enough to get Garcia out of the country and to put him behind bars in the U.S. for a very long time. Garcia's wife, Anita, is arrested, as is his girlfriend, and the bank accounts seized. Luxembourg police hold Garcia for 6 months on charges of using a fake passport. After that time, the DEA, working with the Department of Justice, uses 6 counts of drug possession and narcotics trafficking to finally bring Garcia back to the U.S. In Los Angeles, Brian Hartford and Ed Williams plead guilty to drug trafficking charges. Hartford is sentenced to 10 years and Williams to 5 years in exchange for their testimony against Garcia. Luxembourg police sentenced Garcia's wife to 4 years and his girlfriend to 3 years. Both women skip bail and to this date have never served the time. On November 15th, 1991, Darnell Garcia stands trial in the U.S. His friend, undercover FBI agent Victor Guerrero, testifies against him.
Well, I've testified in many trials. This is the first time I had to testify against a friend, but it was the right thing to do. He had certainly tarnished our friendship by the actions he had taken. And as a law enforcement officer, then it's my obligation to either substantiate or negate the allegations against an individual. Be it a friend, be it a foe, makes no difference.
On April 16th, 1991, Darnell Garcia is found guilty of selling cocaine and heroin and laundering millions of dollars of proceeds through European banks. He is fined $1.6 million and sentenced to 80 years in prison. For years, Garcia and his gang betrayed their badges by using them to hide their drug dealings.
So there's a certain sense amongst narcotics investigators that we're trying to empty the ocean with a bucket. Some will succumb to the frustration and become cynical about it to the point where they become involved with it. And I think in the case of Darnell Garcia, that's what occurred.
But in the end, the men were tripped up by their greed. The DEA, Interpol, and Luxembourg police put them behind bars, alongside the very drug pushers they had busted years earlier.